Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the very kind words of welcoming. I'm currently still based at the Military Academy here in Saldanha. I'm teaching military history predominantly for second years, and I've always been an admirer of the Military History Society. I have attended a fair amount of your events over the years, and like John rightly mentioned, I felt that as military historians, we should stick together, and I felt that if I could, I would very like to be able to speak to you tonight. The topic for tonight's discussion is the African Police and South Africa Defence Forces operations in Northern Southwest Africa, today Namibia between 1965 to 69. Now, the reason I chose this topic is quite simple. Stellenbosch University and the University of Lancaster in the UK have got a combined research program running at the moment where we are investigating the Alcora agreement between South Africa, Portugal, and Rhodesia that started in the 1970s. And as part of that research, this is some of the of my research. I'm concentrating on the very early part before Alcora actually starts. As another word of for interest sake, you will be hearing this lecture tonight, but this will also form part of a lecture that I'm presenting in Lisbon, in Portugal, at the beginning of June. I'm traveling to the Military History Consortium's conference in Portugal, and I will be doing basically the same, but for the Portuguese audience. So you are fortunately getting it about 15 days before the Portuguese actually get it. With that, let's get started. This is our area of operations that we're dealing with tonight. Northern Southwest Africa's border with Angola to the north, Zambia to the northeast, and Botswana to the east. It is 375 kilometers long, the Southwest Africa-Angola border. Its border with Zambia was 231 kilometers, and its border with Botswana was 1,359. So it is quite a large, extensive area. And in the 1960s, this was almost the land beyond time. Infrastructure was very minimal, little towns, little population, and movement through this area was quite tough. Very little roads. Like for example, Katimu Malilu was cut off basically from all other parts of Southwest Africa. The only way to realistically get there was by air. So why are we talking about this? Early South African Portuguese military interaction. In 1960, General Stephen Melville, who's the Commandant General, the old term for the chief of the defense force, he proposed to Portugal that they should have an agreement because they have been hearing rumors through military intelligence that people are leaving Ovamboland in northern Southwest Africa and are receiving military training abroad. They're not 100% certain where, but they feel that maybe South Africa and Portugal, who's the colonial power of Angola, should start working closely together, sharing information, sharing resources to see if they can counter what they think is coming. In 1961, however, anti-Portuguese uprising takes place in Angola, and the poor showing of the Portuguese armed forces were not portraying very well. They're not very well equipped or motivated to defeat a communist insurgency. Starts to really worry the South Africans and think, what are they going to do? How are they going to proceed to protect northern Southwest Africa if the Portuguese are not really up to the task? With that in mind, a lot of things are happening with South Africa itself at that stage. In May that year, South Africa becomes a republic. And part of that becoming a republic is that we do not renew our membership of the Commonwealth because of our apartheid policy and the resistance specifically from India. And that means that we are without our major trading partner that historically always used to be the UK. So we are in the market for a new major military trading partner. And we find it in the French. General de Gaulle, the leader of France, is more than willing to deal with the South Africans irrespective of apartheid. And you'll see that Africa starts buying a lot of military equipment from 1961 from the French. Now, for this particular discussion tonight, what is important is we buy 33 French Alouette 3 helicopters in July, and in November that year, we buy the first of 100 Panhard AML armored cars in two versions, the 60mm rear loading mortar version and the 90mm high velocity gun version. In 1962, the first of these Alouettes start arriving in South Africa, and that is a major game changer for South Africa the introduction of helicopters within our defense force. We do not really have helicopters up until that stage. We are thinking that helicopters can increase our mobility. We are thinking very along the same lines that the Americans are. They have just embarked on their mission into Vietnam, and they are having a very similar thought process about air mobility and how to use mobility. So both countries are thinking about extensive use of helicopters. There you can see that one of the first helicopters to come into South Africa is this version, serial number 45. Unfortunately, this particular machine is lost during a military operation near New Scherman F Station in Rhodesia in 1980. On the opposite side of the coin, after a lot of negotiations, SWAPO realizes that they have to embark on a military campaign if they want to take over control of Southwest Africa. So on the 4th of March 1965, the first of these externally trained people that left Southwest Africa returned. They're part of the first grouping, and they're leaving from Tanzania, and they are literally traveling from Tanzania across Zambia into southeastern Angola and then into Uvamboland. The South African police, who are responsible for law and order within Southwest Africa, obviously are hearing about this insurrection that's taking place, and they feel that they should also acquire an air force, an air component, a police wing. But they don't have the pilots, they don't have any of that. So they go to the SADF and ask, will it be possible to second aircraft and crews to the South African police for assistance, not only in Southwest, but across the entire South Africa? And the SADF Commandant General obviously agrees to this, and in November 1965, the first two Alouettes and crews are seconded to the South African police and are stationed here in Southwest Africa. In 7 December, the South African Defence Force also reshuffles its headquarters, and you'll see that there is the emergence of what they call Joint Combat Forces. It's a combined headquarters set up in Pretoria, and it's responsible for all deployment of ground forces and air forces in a ground campaign across the territory. Unfortunately, a little over a year after the first helicopters deploy into Southwest Africa, there is a fatal crash on a search and rescue mission. Alouette with two South African Defence Force members inside, Lieutenant Winterbach and Corporal Morton, along with 3 passengers, which includes a police constable, crashes into the Atlantic Ocean shortly after takeoff. And these are the first losses that the SANDF will have incurred during what we call the border war. However, officially, because they are serving under the South African police at that stage, the South African Defence Force does not take this into consideration today as their first casualties for the border war incident because they were under the police. But they are the first loss of life in what will become the operational area. Very famously, Operation Blue Wildebeest. By 1966, South African police have picked up some of that original SWALA, Africa Liberation Army group that came in. Of that group that comes in, 8 have already been arrested. And under interrogation, they hear how they came into the country, and they hear that there is a plan to set up camps within the territory of Southwest Africa. And South African police intelligence is able to pinpoint where this camp is, because there are follow-on groups after the first one that have left Tanzania, and they have been more successful, and they set up this camp at a place called Ungubashe. And once the camp's location is determined, a joint South African police, South African Defence Force task team is constituted, and 8 Alouettes are allocated to this task group, and they launch an heliborne assault on the camp. The camp has got rudimentary defenses. The SWALA guerrillas have dug basic trenches and things, but they are totally surprised by the air assault. They suffer 2 dead, 1 wounded, and 8 of their members captured, and the South African police and SAF losses are 0. The captured SWALA also reveal how they got into Angola. And you can see on the map now, the large red circle is southeastern Angola. There is virtually no Portuguese military presence at all in southeastern Angola, which is a problem for the South Africans, because that's how these guerrillas are coming in. All the Portuguese activity is far to the north around Luanda and that part of the colony, because that's where most of the European population of Portugal that have immigrated to Angola are actually living in their factories. So the southeast of Angola is literally free of Portuguese at all. The small little red circle is Uvamboland, and that is where the Hearts and Minds campaign of this entire operation will try and take place. Whoever controls Uvamboland controls Southwest Africa. It's the largest population group, it's the largest tribe, and there you can see the little marker where Ngubumbashi is currently situated. So it's in the middle of Uvamboland that this first contact takes place. After Ngubumbashi, everybody realizes that we are facing armed insurrection with soldiers that have been trained outside the borders of Southwest Africa by whoever that is, and will have to jack up our defenses. On 2 September, the Commissioner of Police asked the Air Force, can he have 2 additional Alouettes, bringing to 4 the amount that are deployed in the Southwest. He also asked for air transport, because they have no Air Force at all, air transport for a 36-man South African police riot unit that they want to send to Ndangwa to start trying to dominate the terrain around Uvamboland. Major General Hendrik van der Berg, Lang Hendrik, is the head of the African Police Security Branch, and he goes to the SADF and he says that from police intelligence, they have decided to increase the police's involvement in Northern South Africa by deploying Divisional Counterinsurgency Unit number 9. It's roughly about between 70 and 80 policemen specifically trained in counterinsurgency, and they are going to be moving into Oshakati, in the capital of Uvamboland, to start police operations inside Uvamboland to try and track these SWA guerrillas as they filter in. In September, SWA launches a second assault, this time against the small town of Oshikango on the border between Southwest Africa and Angola. They burn down a couple of houses, injure a lot of people before fleeing back into Angola. This attack, again, prompts the Commissioner of Police to ask for a further 2 Alouettes. And so you can see the African Defence Forces contribution is growing steadily month after month after month. This will bring it now to 6 Alouettes with crews, with maintenance, with ground staff working inside Northern Southwest Africa. Colonel Pat Dillon, who is a South African Police Staff Officer, Counterinsurgency Operations at Police Headquarters, he will now take command of this entire Northern Southwest Africa, because the forces being allocated to the area are now of such a nature and of such a strength that it warrants his direct intervention. By December 1966, SWA combatants have filtered into Uvamboland and are attacking farmsteads. The first one to attack is the isolated farmstead of Mr. Breert in the Grootfontein unit. And by January the following year, Divisional Counterinsurgency number 9 has now increased to over 200 policemen. So it's more than doubled its original size, because they are now responsible for the entire Northern Southwest Africa border, from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the end of the Caprivi Strip. 1,300 kilometers covered by 200 policemen. You can understand they're working very isolated little police posts. I'm trying the best that they can to actually prevent SWAPO from actually infiltrating into the country. But this deployment requires almost 23,000 pounds of rations, and they're using up to 60 vehicles now. And all this additional logistical requirements falls onto the lap of the South African Defence Force. The South African police do not have a very good logistics train. They haven't planned for logistics movement like the military does. So the whole logistical side forms part of the South African Defence Force's responsibility. They request a 2-weekly Dakota flight to fly to Ndangwa, and when needed, all the way up to Rundu as well, to meet their new logistical demands. This is a request that the South African Air Force obviously agrees to. And they also propose, quite importantly, that considering they're already deployed on the border doing this counterinsurgency task, they think it would be good that the SADF starts sending some of the youngsters to work with the police on these counterinsurgency tasks. And 14 young SADF officers and non-commissioned officers eventually do deploy in the first group, and they become the first real SADF boots on the ground in Northern Southwest Africa in 1967. The logistical flights that are taking place now once weekly are eventually amalgamated from the 2 Dakotas into a single Douglas C-54 Skymaster that's flying twice a week from Pretoria all the way to Uvamboland to bring supplies, mostly rations and fuel and things like that, into Northern Southwest Africa. The Timu Malilu, like I already said, is a problem, because there's no real road connection, rail connection at all to Katima. So the only way is via these logistical flights to keep that place up and running. On the 6th of March, the first grouping of police officers and police constables go through a block of training. Now, this block of training is presented by SADF instructors, but at the police college, because the police came to the SADF and said, listen, we are now deployed on this counterinsurgency mission, but we aren't really trained for this. We are trained as policemen, not really as soldiers. And the SADF agrees to give military trainers to train the police in counterinsurgency operations. And by March, 17 of these officers and 64 constables have already gone through this training via 3 courses that were presented at the college. The African police looks at the situation on Northern border and decides that they will have to divide it up into sectors, and they divide the whole area into 3 zones. Zone A would stretch from Womboland to Okavango land and would include the Okavango River with the headquarters in Oshakati. Zone Bravo would be from the Okavango River and the Kwanda River with the headquarters in Rundu, and Zone C would be the area east of the Kwanda River to the Gazangulu with the headquarters at Katimu And this will very those of you who know the later parts of the border war, you can see a correlation between how they are dividing up this area now and how the SADF will eventually divide up this area. It's a logical way based on geography how to actually divide up this area into different zones, and that's the SADF that will do a very similar type of division when they actually take over in 1973. The African police have also been granted permission by their counterparts, the Portuguese secret police, the PED, to be able to cross over into Angolan territory if they are in hot pursuit of a terrorist organization. So the South African police are getting more and more entrenched into northern Namibia. Their counterinsurgency are doing patrols. They are working every day. They are crossing into the border in hot pursuit of this. And none of this is really known today within South Africa. All these military missions that the police actually undertook during this time. And that is partially the reason for this research as well. The African police, even though they now have 6 Alouettes, asked for another 3 because they've divided into 3 zones. It makes sense for them to have 3 helicopters per zone. And when they asked this, when I say they, Colonel Pat Dillon, when he goes and he asks the Air Force, could he have another 3 Alouettes to divide up, they say, sorry, we can't help you. Simply because, and you can see the photograph to the right, the first of the Super Freelon helicopters have just arrived from France, and the Air Force has designated some of its existing pilots and technical crew and flight engineers to do conversion training on the Super Freelon, so they don't have any more pilots available to give to the police. All that they can do is say, we have 1. We can give you 1 extra helicopter, bringing your total to 7. Brigadier Dillon, the little bit that I know about him, he's quite a stubborn man. He's quite a energetic police officer, and he doesn't take no very well. And he absolutely refuses this offer. He says no. He wants 3 Alouettes, and the SNF will provide 3. That's his task. That's his mission. That's what he wants. And the SNF says, well, sorry, we can't do it. And Dillon is quite adamant and quite angry with the SADF because he feels that it is his right to ask for these equipment pieces, and the SNDF just should sort themselves out and give him what he needs. The SADF feels aggrieved, but it's a difference of opinion. The police and the SNDF will have various differences of opinion and differences throughout the border war about how the 2 organizations don't always work well together, and they don't always think in the same way, but they are forced to coexist in the same space. But there will be a lot of tension for a long time between the 2 organizations. While the tension is going on, the African Minister of Defense, who's just become Minister of Defense after the assassination of Verwoerd in 1966 and his replacement of John Foster, Pierre Verwoerd, feels that he must go to Lisbon and go and discuss with the Portuguese this whole southeastern Angola, the lack of Portuguese troops in southeastern Angola, and how they can rectify this. Not long after his visit to Portugal, which is well received, and the Portuguese are more than willing to deploy, but they tell Botha, listen, we are fighting 3 separate wars. We are fighting in Guinea-Bissau, we are fighting in Angola, we are fighting in Mozambique. We are stretched razor thin. We have 150,000 conscripts that come out of every year doing national service. That's the most that we have as a population. We don't have any more soldiers, and 150,000 divided by 3 different vast operational areas is very, very little. So we would love to help you, but we will need significant South African support if you want us to deploy into southeastern Angola. We don't have the equipment, we don't have the manpower, we have a little bit, and what we do have, we are willing to share, but you as South Africans will have to help a lot if you want this to happen. Now, the Portuguese are faced with a bit of a dilemma. They are part of NATO, but under NATO's laws, they are prohibited from using any of their equipment in their colonies. So any NATO equipment that's been donated or they've bought for NATO operations, they are prohibited from using it at all within their colonies. So they have to find an alternative way of manning and equipping their colonial forces in all 3 of their colonies, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, and in Mozambique. While all this political shenanigans are going place, PED, the Portuguese secret police, one day just arrive at a South African police base and say, we need help immediately. There's been an attack on a Portuguese military outpost, and some of the people at the outpost have been kidnapped. Can you help? And the South African police say, absolutely, let's get a mission going. And very quickly, the South African police get 3 of their South African Air Force Alouette 3s and a Cessna 185, a little Cessna planes that they use as mostly transport and liaison and communication type of aircraft, and they fly into Angola. And this is the first time that the Africans officially crossed that border on a military mission. Each helicopter, you know, the little Alouette has not got a lot of space. It only has space for a crew of 2 and then 4 people a stick sitting in the back. So each helicopter flies into Narinqua with 1 member of the South African police and 3 Portuguese commandos aboard. When they arrive at Narinqua, they receive orders, and they're told that there are, as far as they can tell, 2 camps where the hostages could be held. They are going to assault camp 1 and then assault camp 2, and hopefully they can free the hostages. The South African Alouette helicopters pick up their police and the Portuguese commanders, fly to the first camp, land. There's a firefight, and one of the rebels gets killed. They pick up the soldiers again, fly to the second camp, land, and 6 rebels are killed at the second camp. But the whole operation leaves a bitter taste in the South African Air Force and the police's mouths, because they see how the Portuguese are operating. They are indiscriminately shooting are not very.
Seem to be dead.
Yeah, we seem to have lost him. Can you hear me, Trevor?
I can hear you.
Good, okay. I'm just going to call him. Okay. Right, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I seem to have lost it. Okay.
Yeah. JP, what I want to do firstly is just stop the recording, right? We'll start a new bit. Stop recording.